I'm here at the South Bank in London, just across the road from the BFI South Bank, where even as I speak, the Uncut season, celebrating 100 years of the BBFC, is going on, showing films from a century of censorship and classification, looking at the different ways in which the BBFC have responded to those challenges. In fact, this evening, I'm interviewing a panel including David Cook on stage here at the BFI South Bank, and I asked you to tell me whether you thought, as far as you were concerned, the BBFC are now part of the solution or part of the problem when it comes to movies. Many of you responded, and I have to say, overwhelmingly, your responses were positive. Here's one typical response. This is from Heather Martin. I think the idea of classification rather than censorship has improved the opportunities for grown-up filmmaking. Certainly Kirby Dick, director of This Film Is Not Yet Rated, felt that it was a much better system than the one in the USA. He said he found the BBFC approachable, open and fair. It's amazing how many of you picked up the MPAA, the Americans Ratings Board, to compare their work with the BBFC, and the BBFC always came out of it better. This from Jack Hawkins. I think they're part of the solution, the BBFC, especially compared to the MPAA, whose rating system is quite badly flawed. For example, films with real visceral edge and power like Killer Joe are condemned to financial failure in the US with the dreaded NC-17 certificate. In America, you have an NC-17, no children under 17. You have real problems advertising the film. It really does damage the film's marketing potential. Over here, the 18 certificate is completely respectable. This from K Holland 96. Those of you in England are lucky that your rating system is something to be celebrated. Here in America, the MPAA rating system grew from something pointless to somewhat of a cinema's Third Reich. This from S.I. Burgess. The BBFC presently stands arguably as one of the best ratings boards active anywhere, despite a problematic history and questionable decisions made even in recent times. British cinema fans are enormously fortunate. After all, just think if we had the MPAA's rating system. And finally, this from Brian in the New Forest, a regular contributor. The key element in the new BBFC is transparency, which can only help consistency. The weird, unaccountable cabal of the MPAA, which can now make one nostalgic for the Hays Production Code, represents nothing better than the most reactionary slice of America, as they're the ones who make an almighty stink if the gatekeepers offend them. And he adds in brackets, in the interest of not breaking any BBC website codes of conduct, I can affirm that whilst typing this, I had at least one foot on the floor. Now, obviously and inevitably, there were criticisms. This from Paul Doherty is very well argued. While there's no doubt the BBFC have progressed beyond their old draconian measures over the last 10 years or so, I do still think their existence is problematic. As a genre film fan, especially horror, it's worth noting that they do still make cuts to films on the basis of certain films having the ability to be harmful to the viewer, an idea which hangs over from the absurd video nasty age. Harm is indeed basically written into the genetic structure of the Video Recordings Act. He cites I Spit on Your Grave, the new version, Human Centipede 2. Other people have pointed obviously to films like a Serbian film. Carries on to say, I have no issue with them classifying films on the basis of age, but the idea that adults can't be trusted to choose what they should and shouldn't watch still seems ridiculous. Which leads us rather neatly into the subject of economic censorship and self-censorship, which has in fact dominated much of this discussion. This from Floundering. The BBFC have gone from being an archaic body on a self-defined crusade to protect the morals of the country and its populace to being a forward-thinking and progressive organisation in a little over a decade. Sadly, however, their traditional underhand mechanisms for deciding what we should or should not watch have simply been replaced by the actions of publishers who think nothing of hacking a film to pieces simply to get it a rating that they want or protect their image as an upstanding member of the industry. Strange how we now look to the BBFC to lead the way. And that point is picked up on by Space Odds. It's amazing to think that the BBFC have changed so much. Finally, we film lovers can watch what was once deemed scandalous only to be controlled by none other than the studios and distributors of film. It's ironic that the censor has now become the film studios, who couldn't care less about morals and more about the revenue they can rake in. Censorship for financial gain. And there's more. This from Joe Buck. What I vehemently dislike, and this is more a fault of production company greed, is that the likes of The Woman in Black can be cut to secure a 12A rating for younger audiences, but the uncut version isn't released for adults. There are 3D and 2D versions of the same film cluttering up our multiplexes. Why not the aforementioned? Well, actually, that's an interesting case. Hunger Games was trimmed by the distributors to get a 12 certificate in cinemas, and then was released in 12 certificate on DVD and 15 on Blu-ray. Oddly enough, in the case of Woman in Black, a 15 certificate version has been passed by the BBFC, but has not yet been released by the distributors. Sticking with economics, this is a very interesting post from Eddie Larkin. They're still part of the problem, I'm afraid, but now for entirely different reasons. Cinema classification is one thing, but the BBFC essentially run a racket when it comes to home video classification. A 2-hour film, plus an audio commentary, plus an hour of supplements, sets you back something like £2,000. This, for a service which is forced upon disc distributors, so there's no opt-out option. Under the terms of the Video Recordings Act, everything on the disc has to be classified. It may be no big deal for the big distributors, but smaller distributors are finding it difficult to justify bothering with supplements and audio commentaries. And I should say that this is an argument which dates back to the very earliest days of the Video Recordings Act, when the small independent distributors said, it's okay for everyone else, we are the people who are getting clobbered by the economics of this. It's economics, not censorship, that we're worried about. I'll end with a couple of comments on the 12A certificate, which still remains the great certification hot potato. This from Gary Ingrid. If the BBFC surveyed the number of parents who preview or at best check out info before letting their little ones see a film, I bet they'd be shocked at the low result. Actually, they wouldn't. They have checked it out. They do know. As an example, I saw Warhorse, a 12A rated film, and the audience was filled with little children, 5, 6, 7 years of age, who became quite upset. And this, from Sarah Jo, worked in various cinemas, says some parents need to realise that just because you can take a child under 12 to see a 12A doesn't mean you should. She cites a number of cases, Woman in Black and Breaking Dawn and Twilight movie. Finishes with this anecdote. I advised a young mother that the film The Vow would perhaps not be suitable for her 5-year-old girl or hold her attention, adding that the film did feature the main female character going through a car window in the first few minutes. Both the woman and my colleague ignored me, and the woman later complained to a manager because another member of staff asked her to please stop her child from running around the cinema screen due to boredom. This is an extraordinarily regular complaint. In fact, there was some discussion of putting in a lower age rate with the 12 certificate, the 12A, but actually nobody under the age of 8. It turned out to be too difficult, but the BBFC are aware of the problem. And it is interesting, therefore, that perhaps now the ball has been thrown back to the audiences. The BBFC have given people the right to choose. Now, parents, start using that right properly.